What is good, club people, and welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Bobbalam, flopping this long thing on the table while y'all guys listen to this video, because in related news we're gonna be talking about Trippie Redd and bargaining the question as to if Pegasus actually flopped as hard as everybody thought, because there's a lot of there's just a big trend online that Pegasus flopped and like everybody hated the album. Now I completely disagree. I messed with the album heavy, but I do see how some people didn't like it for some of the reasons that we'll get into later in the video. So without further ado, did Trippie Redd flop on his latest album Pegasus? Let's talk about it. Okay, so to get right into the video, Trippie Redd's first week sales for Pegasus were just announced from academics on Twitter, stating that he sold 61K first week, which was actually better than the original expectation that I saw a couple days ago, in which it was 43K. So I don't know what happened. Maybe merge bundles were counted, most likely not, because of something we'll get into a little bit later, in which Billboard actually changed their rules, and that could be another reason why it technically flopped in some people's eyes. But anyway, another thing to note that it was very significant, and I know a lot of you are already thinking, is that Pegasus actually leaked like mid-August. We're talking like 2.5 months ago, if Pegasus officially released on October 30th, the day before Halloween, and there were literally no changes to the track list or even mixing. So in my opinion, it's still relatively impressive that, you know, with all the MP3s already spreading throughout the internet like wildfire, faster than like Biden's OnlyFans link, that Trippie Redd still managed to sell 61K first week, which actually isn't his poorest sales, whereas exclamation mark last year were in the 50,000s. And an even worse L is that his beloved Playboi Carti feature on that album was removed. So neither of these albums were the biggest L. Aside from all that, I could see how some people would think that it would be an L without the album leaking, and I know a lot of people don't actually know that the album leaked 2.5 months ago, so the average listener is gonna think it's a flop, because 61K isn't really that good, especially with how big of an artist Trippie Redd is, with millions of followers. But something else to note is that it could also be considered a W for an album that released during COVID, wherein album sales are down, with families having less discretionary income to purchase albums or even have Spotify plans. I've actually calculated that artists in this pandemic are losing an average of 1/3 of their first week album sales. For reference, Ariana Grande, who released an album called Positions on the same day as Trippie Redd and actually secured the #1 spot that week, sold 240 to 260K first week, whereas her last album, Thank You Next, sold 360K first week in 2019. Not to mention the fact that there is a new Billboard rule enacted on the exact date of October 8th that banned controversial practice of bundling albums, essentially eliminating merch bundles, wherein it's easier to accumulate album sales, because as you may or may not know, one album sale in streams is equivalent to 1,500 streams. So imagine if you would be willing to buy Trippie Redd's album, you would have to, in streams, listen to it 1,500 times. I don't even know if I've listened to Trippie Redd 1,500 times in total on my Spotify account. So that's why artists put a huge emphasis on merch bundles, because they can literally just sell one sweatshirt or sweatpants or headband or fucking condom or something like that and slap a free album on top of that with a digital download, and it already counts as one album sale. Whereas again, before they would have to get 1,500 streams. But to offset that, there's actually Spotify playlisting, which definitely inflates first week sales for a lot of major artists who get on the cover of like Rap Caviar and things like that. So maybe the merch bundles isn't as big of a deal as it was before, but in comparison to 2019 last year, 2020 is definitely chopping off like 1/3 of the first week album sales. And in relation to this comparison of 2019 to 2020, we're kind of not giving Trippie Redd a break, in that we're comparing him to much bigger artists when he's kind of in between like the two tiers. We got the Uzi, Drake, Juice WRLDs, who are selling like hundreds of thousands of copies first week of their albums, whereas there's the lower tier of like the Blueface, Comethazine, Smoke Perp, and others, y'all know who I'm talking about, who sell around like 10K. Comethazine actually sold 7K roughly with his Bosky 4 album. And so So to compare Trippie Redd to the bigger artists is kind of unfair when he's kind of mid-tier with like the mainstream pop artists, if that makes any sense. Cause let's be honest, Trippie isn't making hits for the whole pop crowd. Like one of his most popular albums, A Love Letter to You 4, only sold 104K first week, and that included merch bundles, and it was not during COVID. So if we chop a third off of that, cause that released in 2019, that's already in the 60Ks. Just like this album, Pegasus. And as we mentioned before, this isn't his biggest L of an album, whereas the exclamation mark album that released right before A Love Letter to You 4 actually sold less albums with like 51K first week. And the Pegasus album just has had major backlash within the whole process. I mean, the controversial cover art where Trippie Redd's dressed up as Tarzan and reenacting the Mr. Hands video. Only real ones know what video I'm talking about, with like the horse and like the big, you know what I'm talking about. So I don't think this is a big of an L as people are thinking, because this is COVID and everything's kind of depressed. Even the economy, a lot of people don't have jobs. Why do you think Travis Scott, Playboi Carti, and many others aren't dropping albums in 2019? Because everyone's set up for failure currently. Even Drake only sold in the 200Ks. And as we talked about already, with Trippie Redd's album leaking 2.5 months ago, he kind of had to release the album or just move on to the next one, which is going to be Life's a Trip at Night. And one last thing before we go is that some of the most beloved and classic albums, such as Take Care by Drake, regarded as the most popular artist nowadays. I mean, I think he just hit that record of like most revenue generated by any hip-hop act or artist ever. But all of these classic albums were actually hated at first in a lot of cases. So that could very well happen with Trippie Redd. I think that personally that the hip-hop community generally hated this album because it had a pretty long track list with 26 songs, wherein the casual listener just doesn't have the attention span for something like that to an artist that they're not really that passionate about. However, on the other hand, Trippie fans, and I'm talking mega fans, helps the cause, because with 26 songs that really aids in getting to that 1500 mark for streams to one album sale. Whereas if it was like a 10-song album, you would kind of overplay the album if you kept listening to it on repeat. You feel me? I also feel like Trippie kind of overhyped the Pegasus album, and I'm not saying that the album itself was overhyped. I'm just saying he tried to build up too much anticipation, whereas I feel like the new model for rappers to drop albums like every year or multiple albums per year, say like an NBA YoungBoy, does a lot better because it doesn't create too high of expectations for the album. And that could be the reason why people are hating, because fans were waiting for Pegasus for so long and then it leaked and then it honestly didn't reach those expectations. It's probably why a whole lot of Red is taking so long too. And people did the same thing the Eternal Take, calling it mid, by Lil Uzi Vert, by the way. So with that, it's your boy Bobbalam signing off, protecting Trippie Redd at all costs, because on IG Live he really didn't seem too happy about the 61K first week number. He said he was happy with it, but let's be honest, he probably wanted a little bit more, or at least to beat his last album, A Love Letter to You 4, after building so much hype for it. But it's all good. He's already working on new music daily, posting new snippets, nudes, and all that. But let me know in the comments what you thought of Pegasus. Half of y'all are probably gonna say it was trash, but either way, make sure to like and subscribe while you're at it for the latest hip-hop news, drama, and analysis videos, as well as to follow me on all my socials in the description, or join the Bob Gang if you with it. Peace out, cutter people. Know what I'm saying?